The X-Men are one of the most popular superhero teams to have ever existed, but how well do you really know them? Welcome back, Nerd Squad, it's me, Amanda, and these are the top 10 unbelievable facts about the X-Men you didn't know. Let me know what facts surprised you on this list, and if you have any interesting X-Men facts yourself that you'd like to share. Number 10. Fast food almost ruined 90s X-Men. What even is the title of this point? Well, it was the best way I could put it. It was revealed a while back that the 90s animated X-Men series that we all grew up knowing and loving, personally for me this was my buy-in to the X-Men and much of Marvel's superhero world, was almost cancelled because of an Australian fast food chain. No, I'm not joking. Apparently Marvel had negotiated a deal with them to do giveaways of toys for the X-Men series, but the contract also cemented that the toys would then have to appear in the show. However, the designs for these toys apparently were pretty terrible. Artist and producer Will Mineo told Marvel he would not put them in the show. As a result, he and the production company behind the show, Graz, almost lost their control over the series. So we could have had a totally different series, or maybe not one at all, who knows what could have happened. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when I talk about mutants, I know I love when I talk about mutants, be sure to go check out our X-Men playlist where we all talk about mutants all the time, because that's all that's on the playlist. Number 9. Beast wasn't always blue. Beast might be iconic because of his appearance in the film adaptations, but did you know that him being a blue beast isn't even his main mutation in the comics? And that he didn't always look like this in terms of his X-Men comic book origin. In the prequel films, the serum Nicholas Hoult as Hank takes is intended to be a cure for physical mutations, but this also ends up backfiring when the cure actually kind of intensifies his mutation, making it a lot worse. And because he used some of Mystique's blood, it turns him into a beast with blue fur, because Mystique is blue. You see? In the comics though, Beast's initial mutation is that he just has big hands, big feet, and he's super dexterous and nimble. Kinda similar to what they did in the movies, but a little bit different. Basically he's kinda like a monkey. Then as a scientist, he isolates the hormone that causes mutation, which he is then forced to take himself to protect the formula from those who basically want to steal it. This causes him to become a gray or black furred beast, which would later be changed to blue just because of how blacks were basically colored back then. It caused confusion, and then we got Blue Beast. Hank misses his window to use the antidote for this serum though, and then is unable to revert this secondary mutation, with it becoming permanent instead. Number 8. Animated Beast appeared in live action. I just found this one out today, so I thought I would share it with you all. Did you know that the actor who voiced Beast played a truck driver in the bar where Wolverine meets Rogue in the first X-Men film? It's true! George Buza is the voice of Beast in the animated series, and he appears in this iconic scene. Also friends, I need to go back and watch the X-Men films. What is happening with this bar and the lighting in this scene? Why does it give me abandoned warehouse vibes? Was that intentional? Was that just how films were in the early 2000s and late 90s? I guess kind of, actually, stylistically. Number 7. Not very popular. While we typically celebrate the X-Men as one of the most popular hero groups of all time, I even said it in my intro, not everyone is actually a fan of them. In fact, in the comics, many people don't even like them. Despite being a superhero team, they have dealt with persecution from day one and still do even today, even in 2023. Even other heroes who they might call allies or friends at times have seemingly been absent when the mutants were being hunted or persecuted by others just for existing. So while here, in our reality, the X-Men are, you know, the best, just know that in the comics there are many on Earth who actually consider them more of a nuisance than J. Jonah Jameson considers Spider-Man a menace. That being said, JJ himself is actually oddly a supporter of mutants. He's a big supporter of just like civil rights in general. So while he might hate Spider-Man and many others on Earth are critical, jealous, or even just hate mutants, JJ himself actually fights for their rights, even at the risk of making himself and the Daily Bugle a target of the many mutant hate groups out there. And trust me, there's a lot. Number 6. New Mutants. You may have heard about the New Mutants. They had a film and everything. Oh sure, it wasn't like the greatest film out there, and sure, Disney seemed to kinda wanna bury said film after their merger with Fox, with New Mutants being the last film under the Fox X-Men franchise umbrella, but it happened, and there was actually quite a few things I actually liked about that film. The New Mutants in the comics basically took over the role of what the original X-Men had been like. Initially, the X-Men were just a group of teens trying to figure out their powers while fighting baddies, and the New Mutants were basically like the fresh blood for the superhero mutants, the new younger recruits coming in after the original X-Men had basically grown up. Well, that was back in the 80s, and now it's 2023, so the new mutants aren't quite so new or young anymore. They themselves have grown up, which allowed us to pave the way for the New Mutants. As such, the recent New Mutants series focused instead on the older classic New Mutants who operated both internationally and intergalactically, and then the younger New Mutants who basically stayed based on Krakoa. So now we actually have a new group of New Mutants, but we also have the old New Mutants as well. Are you confused yet? Number 5. The New Marauders. I love this team. Hands down one of my favorite new teams we've gotten, and my favorite mutant team ever, maybe? I mean, I love the X-Men. They are classic, but this spin-off team is just honestly something else. Also, what a powerful team, especially that initial roster. Led by the formerly known Kitty Pryde, who now prefers to simply go by Kate, the New Marauders team is one that instead of harming other mutants, focuses on saving them. That's right, they took the name and they reclaimed it for good. The Marauders were actually once Mr. Sinister's band of goons who did his bidding and were involved in the mutant massacre, but instead, here they are, led by Kate Pryde, initially sailing around the world to rescue mutants being held prisoner by their own nations so they can safely bring them home to Krakoa, and now they've actually gone intergalactic, sailing through space and fighting aliens to do basically just that. Number 4. The Limbo Embassy. Dark Web was a weird time, and to really highlight how weird that event was, I have an update for you. So, Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, one of my favorite tragic mutant characters and X-Men villains of all time, recently turned over a new leaf. During Dark Web, she wanted Jean's memories of her son, baby Christopher, aka Nathan Christopher Summers, aka Cable as most people know him, as she felt she had missed out on his upbringing, which honestly she did, so I understand why she'd want that. What did she do to get these memories? Well, she ended up taking over Limbo from Magic under apparently the guise of being good, though in the New Mutant series this actually seems to have been written more as a genuine turning point for Maddie, but never mind. And then once again she unleashed a demon army on New York. Because it worked so well the last time, Maddie. In the end, Jean gave her the memories she wanted without hassle willingly, turning Maddie firmly to the good side with her becoming the ally of the X-Men. Because, you know, she was like, oh, you just would have just given them to me and I could have just asked you and actually you helped me to get resurrected. Oh, okay. Maybe we should just be friends. And in the aftermath of Dark Web, we were left with a weird gift to New York from Maddie's Limbo, the Limbo Embassy, which also happens to be where Ben Reilly's villainous Chasm is being held prisoner after he and Janine as Hallows Eve attempted to usurp Madeline as ruler of Limbo. Yeah, that's a weird thing. That's gotta be a weird thing on the New York landscape, you know? It's just a big demon tower. Wow, alright. Number 3. Magneto once led the team. Or rather, ran the school and led a team. When Professor X went to space to go be with his Shi'ar waifu, Lilandra, Empress of the Shi'ar, who had space medical treatments that Professor X needed to live at the time, Magneto took over for him. While many people think of Magneto as a straight-up X-Men villain who is sometimes an ally of Professor X's because of their long-standing history in the films, in the comics he's not only been an ally, but he's also at this point been an anti-hero, straight-up hero, and even team leader on the side of good. In fact, if you saw the Magneto miniseries that was announced and is expected to release in August, this is actually a retrospective series that takes us back to his time as headmaster of the school and leader of the New Mutants team, which I think is pretty cool. I don't think a lot of people know this about Magneto. Number 2. Almost cancelled. If you can believe it, as popular as the X-Men are now, this wasn't always the case. In fact, there was even a time when the X-Men comics were cancelled, with almost no possibility of a return in sight. It wasn't until the days of Chris Claremont that the X-Men would truly be cemented as a Marvel staple. Sure, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee started the X-Men off, but there were multiple instances during those days where X-Men actually wasn't doing well and then ended up being cancelled, and people didn't even know when or if it would actually come back. Honestly, people probably didn't even care back in the day because no one really liked the series that much. However, Marvel actually never gave up on the team, and despite the series being cancelled in 1970, after 66 issues, they did their best for 5 years to feature the X-Men anywhere they could in their other books, with the hope of seeing the team return one day. And guess what? It worked. It wouldn't be until the summer of 1975's giant-sized X-Men #1, but they would return with a new story written by Len Wein, who also would be a very iconic X-Men writer as well. Number 1. Control over life and death. Would you believe me if I told you that the X-Men now have control over life and death? If you aren't up to date on the current ongoing mutants in the comics, this is what is happening in the current era. I like to refer to it as the Krakoan era. Krakoa as in the sentient mutant island which all mutants moved to, creating their own nation there. I know this might sound familiar with the prior existence of places like Utopia and Genosha in the comics, but this time around it actually has been pretty different. Namely because mutants now control the ability to resurrect themselves, becoming in essence immortal by using the Five, a group of 5 super gifted mutants, to create clones of fallen mutants and then using mental backup stored in Cerebro to restore not only their bodies but also the minds of those that they lost as well. Initially this was reserved for mutants who they only actually had backups for, then it was expanded with the help of the Scarlet Witch to any mutant who had basically ever existed, then it was further expanded when their secret got out to all of humanity that they were, resurrecting themselves, with them even bringing back other non-mutant heroes like Captain America during the AXE Judgment Day event. And after that they were like, well I guess we gotta start bringing some people back, so we'll make a thing for that. Jean, you're in charge. That's about it. Until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.